memcached. And they knew how to implement systems monitoring for that. But how do they monitor now MongoDB? They could obviously integrate some plugins from Nagios, Zabbix, or Shinken if they're using that, and they can probably get data from MongoDB into Graphite or in InfluxDB. But pushing data to a monitoring system isn't enough. What should they monitor? What are the key performance metrics they should be looking at? With MongoDB, they have no clue. With MySQL, it was easy. It's just looking at the IOPS, it's looking at number of pages going in and out of the InnoDB buffer pool, or maybe the slow queries. And talking about slow queries, SQL is relatively easy to read, but what about Mongo queries? How do they debug Mongo queries? How can they figure out what is slow in Mongo? Similarly, backups. They had one backup system, extra backup, streaming to some huge machine with a lot of disks in there. And of course, just a tarball storing that is easy. But how do you backup MongoDB? What is the impact of a backup? What should we backup from MongoDB? Everything? Only one schema? And how do we restore from a backup? That has to be tested, especially if you want to provide backups for development purposes, or if you have some disaster recovery plan. All of a sudden, in your disaster recovery plan, you don't have only MySQL to take care of, but also MongoDB. The scaling out. One of the requirements in this application was that data has to be kept until the next visit. So we have to keep all the data in there. That means that it's ever growing. So with MySQL, the scaling options are relatively easy. Read-bound workloads, add more slaves. Write-bound workloads, perform sharding, or apply NDB cluster. That's relatively easy. But how should you do that with MongoDB? When should we scale out? And how do we add a new shard? And how do we redistribute data between shards? And how do you actually add a new read slave? That's all new knowledge, and this operations team doesn't have that knowledge yet. Software updates is also one of the new pains. With MySQL, there was probably clearly a way to handle updates once they hit a bug, for instance, or with every major release or every minor release even. But it was a clear upgrade process, and a lot of people would be involved, and everything was fine. However, what do you need to do with MongoDB? When do you need to update? And what is the impact of a 0-day bug? How do you handle that? It's all new knowledge, and that's mostly what is keeping them back. And then the BI side of the business. BI with MySQL was easy. They just provided some read slave where they can provide a full database dump, remove all traffic from that slave, load it into the data warehouse, or allow certain schemas and tables to be queried. And most of the BI tools that are around here can connect to MySQL using a SQL connection directly or using ODBC. So that's easy for the BI guys to query a data store. However, BI with MongoDB, how should you handle that? There are a couple of native MongoDB analysis tools that allow you to do analytics on top of MongoDB, but that's not integrating into your existing BI stack. You can write your own exports, but basically you would probably need to do a lot of work yourself. And obviously, since the new version of MongoDB 3.2, there's a new BI connector, but there's a lot of talk about the way they implemented that. And I don't want to go into the details of that. And then, of course, once we have implemented MongoDB into this MySQL-oriented company, a new project emerges, and they get into this same cycle. Another team has a great idea and a new application to deliver. And the requirements are gathered, and they want to allow the users to view the earnings of of something that they're promoting, for instance. And data must always be 100% reliable. It needs to be retrieved. So the storage must be asset compliant, and they're choosing the right tool for the job and store the data relational in a Postgres storage. And it could have taken MySQL in this case, but maybe someone wanted to sign off some PCI compliance here and use Postgres instead. I cannot tell, but basically they're now introducing a third data store in this company. So is Polyglot Persistence good or bad? Well, there are a couple of drawbacks. You need a lot more knowledge on a specific domain, and I have repeated that many times, that you need to think about backups, you need to think about how the way you are going to restore systems integrated into your data disaster recovery plan. You need additional tooling next to your existing tooling. For MySQL, there was the Percona toolkit. There were a couple of systems that you could use to monitor it. With MongoDB is a whole different storage system, so you need to have different tools to manage. You also might need more hands to maintain the systems. As we are introducing more and more data stores, nobody can actually be 100% expert on all 7 storage systems. So you might actually want to spread the load among multiple people. But there are good benefits as well. It adds a lot of flexibility to your company, and especially the company is now allowed to use the tool for the right job. And also the teams that are working on these applications, they really fancy using MongoDB because they think MongoDB is the best solution out there. And they're really driven and dedicated on this application, on this storage system. And if they work in a DevOps way, also developers can actually maintain and monitor and take ownership over applications and storage. And that's also really important, that not only the DBA or the sysop can now work on this new storage system, but also the developer can actually prevent things from happening. They can already see that something is happening in the MongoDB system that is out of the ordinary, start to look at the queries that are firing at it, and then come to the conclusion that they either need to scale or they need to change the query. So it's all about using the right tool for the right job. There are, however, some challenges. How are you going to deploy various data stores? And how do you handle high availability and failovers? And every time you have to figure it out again and again. Scaling and sharding, it's different per data store. You need to interpret graphs and monitoring differently. You also need to schedule backups and handle recovery, and you need to handle updates and upgrades. So there's a lot of things you are being challenged on. But Polyglot Persistence is here, and it's here to stay. And the variety of data storage just keeps on growing. I think every month there probably is a new piece of data, type of data that needs to be stored in a different way. Some company thinks of a new solution on how to store that. And whether that's a data store that's here to stay is questionable, but the fact is that every year new data stores start to emerge. Also, polyglots are getting more and more into the clouds. So you have the cloud providers already providing new ways of storing your data next to the compute nodes where you run existing software on. So you better be prepared for Polyglot Persistence. At this moment, we came to the end of the presentation, and I wanted to give a demo here. But before we go into the demo, I want to do the next poll. JJ, can you do that?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Art. Yes, so we just wanted to, since we've been looking at the different types of data stores that organizations might want to use or already use, and as everyone in the audience confirmed, you seem to all be using 2 to 4 data stores yourselves. So we wanted to just ask, what these are, and this is just just a selection of them, whether it's MySQL or PostgreSQL, MongoDB, Cassandra. We kind of focus on those today, but of course there are many others. So it'd be great to see or to get your feedback on which ones you're using. And the system limits us to 5 options, so we picked those kind of obvious ones. Those are kind of the top 3, 4 open source data stores that people use. But of course there are many others. So it'd be interesting to see what everyone in the audience has running at the moment. So just give it a few more seconds. I still see some of you participating in the question. That's great. Thanks very much. So I'm just going to close this now and share the results.